Hey there, Buck Bookers, and welcome to another episode of everybody's favorite Buck's Books. I am your host, Buck, and today we are going to be revisiting my current hyperfixation, which is, I'm not going to say it's going strong, like it has definitely lost a little bit of steam since the last time we talked about it, but it is still going. And I owe a lot of that to the fact that every day when I wake up, I read that 365 Tao book, and it's still good. I have added a Zen book at the end of the day, and some other Tao book called like the Joy of Daily Tao or something like that, which is also good, but less good, which is why it shows up at the end of the day instead of first thing in the morning like 365 Tao. And 365 Tao is by our boy Ming-Dao Deng. So I've been celebrating his entire catalog. I've been trying to find everything that this guy has written and burn my way through it, and most of it is really good, although all of it is gimmicky. Everything he writes has a gimmick to it. And when the gimmicks are good, that's fine, but when the gimmicks are not, it's not. So I finished, I'll tell you, I didn't finish it. I just stopped reading one called Scholar Warrior: An Introduction to Tao in Everyday Life. And the reason I stopped reading it is because it was just like a really poorly structured Qigong and herbalism text. Like, I thought it was going to actually be about Taoism, and it is, because both of those things are about Taoism. But it's like trying to describe how you're supposed to do like the Tai Chi stuff, and that's really not how any martial art works. Like, you don't read a book and know. That's why they have schools. That's why the schools are as lucrative as they are, even when they're bad, because the expectation that you need to learn the specifics, the very precise specifics of the art from someone who knows and has practiced it. And also the herbalism, that's just a book telling me to eat mild poisons. And the book is not, there's no scientific backing even. And we know how I feel about science, so that doesn't necessarily work against it. But it's describing all of these exotic herbs I've never heard of and what they're for. And once again, this is not to criticize our boy Ming-Dao Deng. I trust him, sure. But not so much that sight unseen I'm going to start ordering exotic Chinese herbs off Amazon to start adding to my powders because it's going to maximize my chi output. That's not going to happen. So that was one gimmick I gave up on. I told you about the gimmick with the one where he just constructed a sort of meandering narrative with excerpts from different Taoist texts, sort of like a ransom note with pages cut out of magazines. This one's gimmick is that it's a novel, an actual novel that tells a story, but it's a novel that's supposed to be the biography of his Sifu, his master, right, in Taoism. And it's called The Wandering Daoist by Deng Ming-Dao, or Ming-Dao Deng, depending on whether you're reading it from Goodreads or from the title of the book. First of all, 5 stars right off the bat. Book is amazing. Loved it. Had fun the entire time. Couldn't put it down. This one's gimmick worked really well, and that's because this one is just a kung fu movie that doesn't make any sense. It only laterally discusses Taoism. That's not true. It does discuss Taoism, but only in terms of how it is used by the protagonist to expand his martial ability. So I had to look it up just now, but because I don't know anything about anime, but the term is a shonen anime, like Dragon Ball Z, or like, you know, like Dragon Ball Z, or the one about the pirate made of rubber. I don't know anything about that one except for what my nephew told me about it. But as I understand, all of them sort of follow this trajectory where he's going to be the very best like no one ever was, and so he keeps training, and then he meets someone who is unbeatable, and then he bumps up his power level enough to beat him, and then there's a bigger threat, and now it's cataclysmic and going to destroy the universe, and so he needs to call upon the spirit energy and bump up his power again, and it's all about being really good at kung fu. And so is this book. It starts when he is a gross little noble boy who's running around stealing things at the fair. And then he gets tricked by a couple of Shaolin monks into accompanying them on some sort of quest because a Taoist sage sees the avatar symbol in his forehead and says he will be a great magus of some kind. So this spoiled little noble boy goes with them, and he's a brat the whole way. But the Shaolin monks are pretty cool about it because, like, they're the things they do make them pretty patient. And they eventually get up there, and when he gets up there, he's like, "No, I want to play with toys and break stuff." And they're like, "No, now you must embrace the Tao." And he's like, "Ah, yes, of course." And then he just becomes the perfect kung fu genius, and from that point on, he's just doing martial arts every day and sweeping the temple and gradually becoming introduced to what is the Tao. And then there's a fantastic training montage which spans probably the first quarter to half of the book, where it just talks about like the various martial arts poses and the immortality that the Taoist sages are trying to get to. And this is broken up by tales, stories about the masters who exist in the temple. And ostensibly, they're just like they're sages. There's guys, they're just studying the Tao and they're meditating all the time and they're being at one with the nature. But they're really good at kung fu. And so they go down and they like kill bandits. And there was this one part that really stuck out in my mind, where they were talking about the one Grand Master of this particular temple found out about 7 monks who had fled the temple, who had gone rogue. They went AWOL from the temple, and they started screwing around with drugs, and they became what they called I'm pretty sure they called them the Poison Daoists, something like that. And they were down at the bottom of the mountain, and they had taken over a town using martial arts, and they were just using it to do drugs and take concubines and other crimes. Like I don't remember all the details of the crimes, but I know they stopped short of cannibalism, I'm pretty sure, but like whatever else you could think of that was bad, they were down there doing. So the Grand Master said, "For honor, this must stop." And he goes down there and the way the story is told, it's just such a stereotypical kung fu movie sequence of cliches. They're all like, they meet there and they're all whispering over their shoulders at one another, and then they jump up and they're fighting on top of 20-foot poles, and this is all just described in the book. And it's dissonant at first because there was none of this crouching tiger stuff going on in the book. There was training, and they were like jumping off of platforms in order to learn how to tumble and stuff like that, and they were doing all sorts of horse stances, but you didn't see where it was going until he goes there and he just like decapitates these dudes with his hand, just like rips their eyes out and stuff. So it's wild. And so that continues until the protagonist, whose name, I'll tell you his name, Quan Sai-young. Till the protagonist, Quan Sai-young, decides that China's at war, and he has to go participate in the war for his family. And the temple is like, we are your family now, for you have embraced Tao. And he's like, "No, China is my family, and I must go fight in the war." So, like, the thing is, this took place in, like, the 40s. So they have guns. But he's still down there just sneaking around in his pajamas, just doing high kicks and doing pretty good with it. It seems to be working for him. It was suggested that he turned the tide of several of these battles in the course of World War II. So yeah, the one with the tanks. and our boy Quan is just running around there in his karate pants with a sword, just like handling it. So again, really cool. Like it's a cool concept for a book. It seems kind of dissonant, but the idea is that all of this is technically encompassed within the Tao, because the Tao is everything. You know, the Tao is not a religious structure as most others are. It is an understanding of one universal life force, a flow of fate. And Quan decided that his fate was flowing into the war, so he went down and he became a little warlord, and he became built for the kill. You know, he just hardened his heart, and that lost him the rest of his childish naivete. And then after that, he runs around and does a bunch more sage stuff. And then at the end of the book, it kind of just... Earlier I mentioned the shonen animes, right? And like I said, my experience with them is not expansive, but as I understand, after a season or two, they've kind of jumped the shark. There's only so many times you can have a universal threat level and then keep one-upping it. This happens as well in Brandon Sanderson novels. I remember in the Mistborn, the original Mistborn trilogy, he started with something that was a global catastrophe. You know, whoever the villain of the first one, it's been a long time. The villain of the first one was a global catastrophe, and it ultimately culminated in the guy, like, it was basically Roland Deschain from the Gunslinger, only he ate metal all the time, and that was the main character. So it's basically that guy, and he has to fight ruin as a concept. Like the philosophical ideal, the Platonian form of ruin is what's threatening the world by the third book, because he just kept one-upping himself and there was nowhere left to go. At some point, if you keep fighting the next big bad, eventually you will be faced with the actual biblical devil. And when you are faced with the actual biblical devil, you have nowhere left to go. That's where the series has to end. And Cthulhu maybe, but now it's just getting silly. You were silly before, you brought in the devil. So that's sort of what happens at the end of the Wandering Daoist. He had escalated, so he'd like... the villain was World War II. So after that, he just kind of wandered into the forest and wound up fighting demons. Like various of these demons. And I've said early on, that's one of the things that attracted me to Taoism in the first place, that got me hyper-focused on it, was the idea that it's just Zen that believes in demons. And sure, yeah, no, I've known people who have convinced me that demons are real. So this encompasses everything that I'm after. And now he's out there in the woods, and the demons are, you know, doing what demons do, trying to tempt him, trying to scare him, then trying to kill him. And he just keeps meditating or beating the piss out of him. That's the end of the book. So it goes into a very psychedelic direction at the end. So it starts feet on the ground, very basic. This is a child. He is at the fair. He is having a good time. And then he falls in with the monks, and then Hogwarts training montage, and then he goes a little further, and then he has his own grand adventures. But all of that is kind of rooted in reality, and it isn't until he wanders into the woods, and it's never explicitly stated that he lost his mind. We don't know that he lost his mind, but it seems very much that he lost his mind, because he's fighting a lot of demons. And that's how he kind of ascends to Grand Masterdom, and the book suddenly breaks off there. So I don't know if he was like still alive at that point and he had just returned from his little demon adventures. I don't know. But I do know what was not mentioned in the book, but what was something that had to have happened in his life, is he had to go on to become some sort of Tao instructor in order for him to teach the author of the book, Ming-Dao Deng. Because, as established, Quan Seong was his Sifu. That was the guy who introduced him to Zen, introduced him to martial arts, introduced him to Qigong, introduced him to herbalism, introduced him to basically what he'd go on to build his entire career out of. 5 stars. If you like kung fu movies, if you like people fist fighting demons, if you like any of the things I've said about Taoism so far, buckle down and read it. This might be. I hesitate to say. You saw me hesitate there. I hesitate to say that it is Ming-Dao Deng's best book, because I am really enjoying 365 Tao. But at the same time, that doesn't even feel like a book. That feels like some sort of interactive calendar. So in terms of like the actual books for books' sake, I would say that this is definitely his best, and by a lot, as compared to all the other ones that I've read. But like I said, I really enjoy 365 now. All right, that's enough out of me. That's 2 in one day, which is why I'm wearing the same shirt. Like, follow, subscribe, share, do whatever it is you do. I will see you again very soon, because I got a couple other books chambered that I got to get onto video before I forget about them, because I did finish reading them like within the past 2 weeks. Okay, bye.